Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So at least 12 Conservative Party MPs are facing the possibility of criminal charges tonight after they were referred to the Crown Prosecution Service by police over their election expenses, following a year-long investigation by this programme. From Devon and Cornwall to Cumbria, prosecutors will now decide whether to lay charges for failing to properly declare spending in their election campaigns. Our investigation prompted an unprecedented national inquiry by the Electoral Commission and then by more than a dozen police forces. Tonight, we have more allegations that this scandal leads to the very heart of Downing Street. Channel 4 News has obtained new secret emails which reveal how two more of Theresa May's closest advisers were involved in the most controversial campaign of all, the party's battle against UKIP leader Nigel Farage in South Thanet. Michael Crick is with me now. Michael.
Well, John, this situation is unprecedented and is extraordinary. As you've said, we now know tonight that 12 police forces around England have delivered files of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service about MPs in their area. Those police forces, the CPS has confirmed to us 11 police forces, Avon and Somerset, Cumbria, Derbyshire, Devon and Cornwall, Gloucestershire, Greater Manchester, Lincolnshire, the Metropolitan Police, Northamptonshire, Nottinghamshire and West Yorkshire. In addition, Staffordshire Police have also confirmed to us they have sent a file of evidence to the CPS. Now, that's 12 forces. In some cases, they were looking into 2 or 3 MPs. We could be talking about 20 MPs or so here. In addition, we know there were 5 other police forces that were also carrying out investigations we haven't heard from yet. Cheshire, Lancashire, the West Midlands, West Mercia and Kent. And Kent, of course, covers South Thanet, the campaign where the Conservatives managed to defeat Nigel Farage amid huge controversy. We reported a couple of weeks ago on how Nick Timothy, Theresa May's Joint Chief of Staff, was tied up in that campaign. Tonight, I report on how 2 other senior Downing Street advisers also had roles in South Thanet. In the corridors of power tonight, they're getting very anxious. Around 24 government MPs waiting to hear whether they face prosecution that could endanger their seats. Amid growing anger, they've been landed in it by Conservative Party headquarters. A story we've been investigating for more than a year now is coming to a head, and powerful figures in the government are implicated. Tonight, new documents obtained by this programme draw more of Theresa May's advisers into the scandal and raise serious questions about whether the party told the truth when it claimed repeatedly all its election spending was legal. It was last winter when we first revealed the Conservative Party had spent tens of thousands of pounds during the last general election that didn't seem to have been properly declared. The money appeared to have been spent in key marginal seats, which the Tories needed to take power. But the sums didn't appear on the local spending returns, even though the law says any money spent promoting a parliamentary candidate must be declared. Had it been declared, then we reckon several MPs would have spent far more than the law allowed. And that raised some very serious and fundamental questions. Did the Conservative Party break the law? And if so, did they do it deliberately in order to win? And were the authorities whose job it is to protect the integrity of our democracy willing and able to act? Our investigation started in South Thanet, the seat in Kent, where the UKIP leader Nigel Farage hoped to become an MP. The Tory campaign there is now being investigated by the Electoral Commission and the police. Last year, we found tens of thousands of pounds spent on local hotels in Thanet, which the party claimed were for the national campaign. Some expenses appear not to have been declared at all.
I wondered if I might ask a few questions about...
The work in South Thanet was run by this woman, Marion Little, a campaign organiser from Conservative HQ in London. She has consistently refused to answer questions. Little and several top Tories were sent down to Thanet in March 2015 to boost the campaign and keep Nigel Farage on the back foot. She was joined by Nick Timothy, now Theresa May's trusted Downing Street Chief of Staff, and who would have been involved in today's U-turn on national insurance. Chris Brannigan, another key number 10 official. Henry McCrory, the former Conservative head of press. And Stephen Parkinson, also one of Theresa May's closest long-standing advisers. New documents seen by this programme suggest all of them were involved in working for Craig McKinley. On one South Thanet contact list, Chris Brannigan is referred to as the candidate's friend. Here's Mr Brannigan going door to door with Craig McKinley to persuade the voters. But Mr McKinley says Brannigan wasn't part of his team.
Right, so we're starting off with Auckland.
And here's Brannigan again, reading a local map while they're out canvassing. We even got a close-up of his McKinley rosette. What of Stephen Parkinson? An email shows he helped draft a letter to send to Thanet voters from the former MP Laura Sands.
That's why I'm asking local people to support local man Craig McKinley.
It says. Henry McCrory was deployed as McKinley's press officer. In one document entitled South Thanet Update, Marion Little writes,
Media, Henry has this under control. His presence and activity have been so important.
The whole team was snapped on a sunny day on the Ramsgate seafront with none other than Theresa May and, of course, Craig McKinley. Here's Nick Timothy, Marion Little, Henry McCrory and Chris Brannigan. And the man in the shades? He looks distinctly like Stephen Parkinson. Over more than a month, the team racked up a bill at the Royal Harbour Hotel of more than £14,000. Marion Little booked the rooms. For example, on the 20th of April, she wrote to the manager with these reservations.
Henry McCrory and Mrs McCrory till Friday. Nick Timothy arriving tonight and leaving Friday. Chris Brannigan arriving tonight and leaving Saturday. If you can book me right through until the 8th of May, that would be good. Do you have a room for Stephen Parkinson for Wednesday and Thursday night?
The Conservatives insist that this team was all part of their national campaign and not involved in the local campaign in South Thanet. And because they say these people weren't involved in promoting Craig McKinley as a candidate, then their costs don't need to be included on Mr Mckinley's legal spending return. And yet, our documents show that this leaflet and this leaflet and this leaflet and this leaflet were all ordered and organised by Marion Little, and she decided when and where these leaflets would be delivered. Peter Wallace was a campaign manager for Labour in South Thanet.
When you realise how much we were outgunned at the end, the ministerial visits, the battle bus, the leaflets, the message that was under the radar, the staff that was employed, the hotel rooms that were booked, it wasn't a fair fight, and I think it's a campaign that really needs to be investigated and looked at properly, legally, to see were election limits broken.
There's no suggestion that the team in South Thanet were there for the entire duration or even spent all their time on McKinley's campaign. But the rules are clear. Any time and money spent promoting the local candidate has to be declared locally. Tonight, the Conservative Party told us again that it's cooperating with the ongoing investigations. The Electoral Commission is due to release its report on South Thanet and other cases imminently. a major inquiry into whether 24 or so seats at the last election had a proper level playing field. And more fundamentally, into the rules by which our democratic process is regulated.
Well, Michael is still with us here. Now, Michael, how does the news of today's referrals of these particular constituencies by the police to the Crown Prosecution Service, how do they relate to what we have discovered?
Well, all we know is that particular police forces have referred in 12 cases, 12 different police forces, to the Crown Prosecution Service. We don't know which MPs are in those files or which MPs are off the hook. But what we do know is that those 12 police forces correspond very closely to the places that we were reporting on, we've been reporting on over the last 12 months. Now, the CPS have only got just under 3 months to decide whether to prosecute or not, because under election law, initially they had a year for possible prosecutions. They've then got a 12-month extension, and so they've got until roughly the end of May to decide whether or not to prosecute. Now, I think it's important to make the distinction here. We've got South Thanet and the controversy about the campaign there involving three of Theresa May's closest aides. But there's also the whole battle bus campaign we've also reported on in the last year, described by the Electoral Commission as a totally different way of campaigning, whereby the Conservatives had these buses that went round the country taking scores and scores of volunteers to marginal seats, putting them up and paying for them to stay overnight in hotels. And we've got evidence that they were campaigning very closely on the ground for particular local candidates. So there's two different aspects of the inquiries here. And I think what will be worrying them tonight in number 10 Downing Street and also half a mile away at Conservative headquarters is that in addition to all of these reports to the CPS, imminently the Electoral Commission is going to produce their report after the biggest investigation they've ever done, their report onto Conservative expenses at the last election.
Michael Crick.
12 police forces have now sent files regarding election expenses to the Crown Prosecution Service. It follows claims the Conservatives incorrectly declared certain expenses as national rather than local to avoid taking expenditure over the legal limit. Here's our political correspondent, Darren McCaffrey.
In a close election race, the struggle for a Conservative victory in 2015 came down to marginal seats across the country. And it is here that the party deployed its battle bus, full of activists targeted at winnable constituencies. But the successful operation is accused of breaking strict laws, which cap the amounts of campaign spending for individual MPs locally. Tonight, following a 10-month investigation by Channel 4 News, the Crown Prosecution Service has now received files from 12 different police forces, from Devon and Cornwall in the south to Cumbria in the north to the Metropolitan Police in the capital. And there are further investigations also underway in other constituencies.
In the Metropolitan Police, I think it's a special inquiry team that are investigating this, and that's almost been replicated across the country. So we've got highly trained, highly experienced investigators, detectives, investigating these allegations. The offences alleged under the Representation of the People's Act 1983 normally has to be made within a year of the election. We're talking about 2015 offences, so they had to apply for special permission. That runs out in 2 months. They've only got 2 months to do this, which is quite a tight timescale because it's quite a complex investigation.
This criminal investigation is in addition, but separate to another, being carried out by the Electoral Commission into the 2015 expenses. Conservative sources are telling me that they expect that report to be published within the next week. The whole saga has left Tory MPs furious with senior party officials, who they accuse of casting them adrift just to cover their own backsides. But clearly it's an issue that lots of MPs don't want to talk about publicly.
No, I don't know what the allegations are. There have been no formal allegations or charges that I've seen. If there are going to be some formal allegations, then I'm sure my party will respond appropriately. And they will do so with lawyers and on good advice. But as these matters are being investigated by independent investigating authorities, it's not sensible to sound off when I don't know the circumstances.
The Conservative Party insists they are cooperating with all the investigations. But with possible further police action and by-elections, if there are successful prosecutions, It's another headache for Theresa May, who's battling at the moment on lots of different fronts. Darren McCaffrey, Sky News, Westminster.